Hello, and welcome to the Running on Carbs podcast. I am your host, Coach Val, and I want to welcome you to episode number 29 of the podcast today. So happy to have you here, and I really hope you enjoy today's topic of conversation. I put some effort and thought into this and some research all about protein. And as plant based athletes, we really need to consider our protein sources, how much protein we're getting, so that we are recovering properly. And I know plant based individuals and vegans, we sarcastically love to get the question, oh, where do you get your protein? Well, today we are going to talk about where we get our protein, and we're going to talk about some unique sources, or maybe ones that aren't your everyday sources that maybe other people might think of, and maybe you haven't thought of, especially if you are new to the plant based lifestyle. You might be asking, where do I get my protein? I'm an athlete, I'm active, I'm a runner. And I know that protein is important for recovery. So, where do I get the best sources of protein? Well, today we are going to break it all down and talk about that in today's podcast. But before I jump into that topic, I just want to remind you, because I really haven't mentioned it lately and I've been kind of falling down on it. And that is that we still have the Apple Podcast review contest. So every month, if you write a review and give our podcast 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and then share it out on Instagram to let me know that it's there, because otherwise I don't even know that there's a new review posted, then you will be entered to win an 8-week training plan of your choice. So maybe you are training for a 5K or a 10K. It's great for that length of time. Or maybe you need a recovery plan. But it'll be, whoever wins that each month will get that 8-week plan. We'll jump on a call, talk about what it is that you need to do and what you're looking to accomplish, and I will customize a plan just for you. So anyway, all it takes is just helping to share the love and help get the podcast out and shared, and give a 5-star review, and share a little bit about what it is that you are taking away from the podcast each week, because I love putting these episodes together for you. But I also love to hear back from people about what it is that you're hearing on the podcast that's resonating and that you're learning from, and what you might like, so that other people can hear those things too and maybe resonate and come and join our tribe. So jump on over to Apple Podcasts. I'd really appreciate it, and I really want to write that 8-week plan for you. Okay, so let's jump into today's topic, protein, hot topic among vegans, and I'd say among non-vegans alike. I know that all throughout my life, even before I went plant-based, protein powder, protein sources were always, top of mind when you're athletic or very active. A lot of individuals use protein supplementation, even if they aren't plant-based individuals. So protein is a big topic, and I'm not just talking about individuals who are following like a keto diet or things like that, but even those just following a regular omnivorous diet. A lot of people who are very active are concerned about making sure that they get enough quote unquote protein, or that they are getting more than enough. I'd say a lot of people don't realize how much, or really how little protein you really need for the body to truly recover and function properly. So we'll talk a little bit about that though. But really, it's not hard to get plenty of protein that you are required to get, that your body needs to fuel and recover from your active lifestyle. But again, as with any diet, you really do need to plan ahead. And I would say get used to tracking, even if you only track for a period of time. Maybe you track for 3 months and then you don't track your food for a period of time because you're eating very similarly. But then go back and maybe 3 months later start tracking again for another period of time, because you really need to know what it is that you're putting in your body. A lot of times we think we know, But until you put it into an app where it's really truly tracking these numbers, you may be off in your guesstimates. So it's very important to know. So get used to tracking, even if you do it in small bits of time. So, first, let's talk about protein needs and the active woman. So, protein number one, going back to basics, is one of the three macronutrients that a body needs to function and live. So you have protein, fats, and carbohydrates. Those are the three building blocks of all of our nutrition. Um, Necessary for muscle repair and recovery. And that's primarily where I mean, obviously, we need it for lots of things, but primarily when we're trying to focus on protein intake, those are the things that we're looking for protein to help the most with when it comes to our active lifestyle. We need it to repair the muscles, repair the everything within our body, all the cells in our body. Everything needs to have some repair, recovery to, get back to homeostasis and to improve as we move on. So once we do the work, we need to recover and build upon the work that we just did. It is not used by the body as a primary energy source, but it can be used for energy during intense exercise. Or if your nutrition is otherwise inadequate, which you may or may not know if it's inadequate, then protein can be used for energy. It is important just to get the right amount of protein for maximum benefit, but too much protein can actually turn into fat in the body, or it can increase the metabolic waste product in the blood. And it's such as like ammonia or uric acid. And those two things can have detrimental effects. Have you ever experienced, so this is something I experienced before I was plant-based. I guess I was getting too much protein, but I didn't know what this was at the time. Have you ever had sweat that smelled like ammonia and smelled really stinky in that kind of chemically way? That was actually my kidneys not being able to process all of the protein that I was taking into my body. And so those were the waste products that was coming out in my sweat glands when I would exercise and exert. So later on, I learned what that was, um, and and that I needed to get more fluids, and I didn't need that amount of protein that I was adding to my body. So if you get that sort of icky ammonia smell, that could be an indicator that your number one, your kidneys may not be working properly. So you might need to hydrate more. And then also you might look at your protein intake to see if you are getting more than you need. So again, going back to tracking. Excess protein can be broken down and used or stored as fat. And so, to prevent the fat storage, it's recommended that protein is really distributed throughout the day in your meals. So, you don't want too much protein in one sitting. Otherwise, your body really isn't able to metabolize that much protein at one time. It's been shown that the body can only metabolize somewhere between, and this is rough, of course, 20 to 25 grams of protein at a time. So much more than that in a meal or a snack. And you might be overloading your body, and your body just might go, well, we'll just store this away for a while. We don't really need that right now. So you only want to take in what you can use. Otherwise, it's kind of like taking a bunch of vitamins and then you're just, peeing them out. It's kind of pointless and expensive urine, as it's called. So we only want to take in what our body can use and be most efficient. So anyway, if you're taking in the 20 to 25 grams per meal or snack, it allows your body to use the protein for muscle repair and recovery and growth instead of the excess being stored as fat. Again, like if you're taking in too much at one time. And the interesting thing about protein, and I do not have this study, but if I find a link to it, I'll put it in the show notes. But I do remember hearing about a study where, and I think it was on nutritionfacts.org or Dr. Michael Greger talked about this, where this study was done about protein in athletes, and and whether it led to increased fat. And this study was very interesting because the subjects ate or took in, I don't know if they ate protein or if they used a powder probably, but they consumed high amounts of protein to see if they gained weight. And what was very interesting is that they did not gain weight compared to the other groups, even though they were on very, very high amounts of protein. And you know why that is, I'd have to go back to the study, but I thought that was quite interesting. And in that study, some of the protein amounts that they were taking in were really high, like far higher than most of us. And at an average, weight and height would probably be taking in. Um, and even then, the weight gain was not significant. So it's not the protein particularly that's going to cause weight gain. However, we'll talk a bit about this in a minute. We also have to consider what is our protein packaged with, because when we take in protein, it's not all by itself. It's going to come packaged with fats, carbohydrates, maybe a lot of each, maybe a little of both. We have to consider that. So we have to consider what our protein is packaged with, and maybe what it's packaged with is what would be causing the weight gain, not necessarily the protein itself. So protein in and of itself probably can't overdo that and gain a bunch of weight. However, you could have other detrimental side effects like we were just talking about with the buildup of the waste products in the blood. So we don't want too much protein, but it's not going to be probably your first reason for gaining weight if you notice that. So, recommended daily dietary amounts of protein. Let's talk a little bit about that. And that range changes based on body weight. So that's how they factor how much protein an individual would need. So just because you are a woman of a certain age, not necessarily going to factor in. However, how much you weigh is going to factor in. So the daily intake for endurance athletes is generally between 1.2 and 1.4 grams per kilogram. So most of these numbers are going to be calculated in kilograms. For general health maintenance purposes, the recommendation is between zero point 0.8 and 1 kilogram per body or of body weight. Or gram per kilogram of body weight. Should I say that again? Let me say that again. Okay, like everyday maintenance numbers, zero point 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. There we go. That was better. um, so here's some numbers that I put together for a 140-pound female. That can be as low as 50 grams of protein for a sedentary woman for maintenance. Or it can be as high as 90 grams for an endurance athlete. So, quite a range for a 140-pound woman, really depending on activity level. Now, with that said, digestibility is a consideration as well when it comes to protein. There are two metrics that are used for measuring the digestibility of protein, which would be, in other words, the bioavailability. How does the body access the protein that is in the foods after you eat it? So that's what we're looking at. Can it use and pull out these nutrients from the food that you put in your body? The two metric measurement systems is the PDCAAS, and I did not write down what that all stands for, but Google is your friend. Mm. And the second one is the DIAAS scale. And between those two measurement metric scales, it's theorized between them that vegans athletes may benefit from higher amounts of protein to improve bioavailability within the body. Now, there aren't studies that have been done extensively on that. That information of increasing protein intake really comes from taking a look at the bioavailability of the proteins that vegans will typically take in and plant-based individuals will take in, and seeing how bioavailable they are, and knowing that if you increase the intake, then the chances are the body can pull more from it. So it's really more of a deduction of logic rather than an actual study that says, oh, plant-based individuals need to take in more in order to get X, Y. So it doesn't it doesn't hurt as long as you don't have, again, those detrimental side effects of too much protein. If you're having that, ammonia smell, sweat and things like that, maybe you're getting too much protein. And we also want to make sure that your kidneys are okay. Um, the recommendations for protein, they range between 1.4 and 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, and as high as 2.7 grams per kilogram during weight loss phase. So there was interesting information about how if you are trying to improve body composition and lose weight, the protein actually went up. So the protein recommendations went up. So with that, my goodness, I did the calculations on that 140-pound female. The high end of that 2.7 grams was 171 grams per kilogram. I'm sorry, 171 grams for that same 140-pound woman. So that's quite a lot of protein. I tend to take in, I'm roughly around that weight, give or take. And I take in about 120 to 140 at the high end of protein on pretty much a regular basis. Um, and that's just for my personal reasons. And I'm not always at that number. But when I'm training, I'm looking for recovery. And so I personally am at that number. That's going to be different for everybody. And remember, I am not a dietitian myself. I am a nutrition coach. So I help individuals take these numbers and put foods together with these numbers that they are able to get through third party sources and dietitians. And then I help you put those foods together so that they make sense for you, and then learn how to use those foods in your everyday life and coach you in accountability, use me as your accountability partner to keep you on track and to know that you're hitting those numbers that are appropriate for you and your body. My body's different. Everybody's different. And that's why we have to work together to find a plan that works for the individual. So for me, that's what works for me. But you can see just from these numbers, I mean, we went from 50 grams to 171 grams of protein per day for that same 140-pound individual based on activity level and on their goals. How much recovery do they need? And are they working on body composition? Are they just simply surviving for, health maintenance purposes? So it all really depends. And that is important when making a decision about how much protein to take in your daily life. Um, Another point on that is that it's important to know that protein requirements can change like throughout the whole year. So in 1 year's time, you might be taking in the low end when you're in maybe a base building phase, and you're not doing a lot of running, you're not doing a lot of activity. Maybe you're past your recovery from your race and you're just kind of in that maintenance phase. You might be on the low end of protein scale. And then when you start ramping up and you are training, maybe you're training for a marathon and your activity level is picking up and you need a lot more support for recovery, and your muscles and everything needs that extra nutrients. So you might go up to, mid or high end of that scale for you. So it really depends on what you're doing in that year, but your protein needs are going to shift and change all throughout the year. So don't think, oh, I need X number of protein grams per day, and that's what it is forever and ever always. Not necessarily. It's something to consider based on your activity level throughout the year. Also, for us in the United States, if you're in the United States, the simplest way, and the reason I say the United States is because we're so bad with the whole kilogram thing. So I thought I'd just give you a quick math lesson. that if you're in the United States and you're not used to kilograms, the simplest way to get your body weight in kilograms is to take your body weight in pounds and divide by 2.205. Or if you want just a really basic, quick calculation, you can just do 2.2. So take your body weight, divide by 2.2, super simple, give you close enough. So at least you'll get the starting range. So anyway, that's for us here that don't work on kilograms. So aside from bioavailability, plant-based runners should also consider how their protein is packaged. So I started off a little bit ago talking a little bit about this. Like for example, beans always been, known as, oh, it's a great source of protein. Yes, it has protein, and yes, there's good protein, and there's lots of longevity purposes to have beans in your diet, but they're high in carbohydrates. So if you've ever looked at the label for a can of beans, you've got a half a cup of beans that maybe have, oh God, I don't have my numbers in front of me. What do they have? 6 or 8 grams of protein, and then they've got like 25 grams of carbohydrates. So there's a lot of carbohydrates that come with your protein in that food. Tofu, soy tofu is higher in fat. Not as many carbohydrates, but you've got a good amount of protein, but then you've got it packaged with fat. And think I don't want anyone to think that these things are good or bad. There are no good and bad foods. There are no good macronutrients and bad macronutrients. Our bodies need them all, and it uses them all in conjunction for functioning in so many ways. Don't think that it has fat, so it's bad. It's not. We need fat. We need that for certain hormones. We need fats for brain health. We need fats for a number of things, like some of the nutrients that come through, like the fat soluble vitamins. They need to have fat in order to get into your bloodstream and to work and to move about the body and be used. So there are no good and bad macronutrients. So I hope that that is understood and that you don't think of it in those terms. But I do think that we have to consider what each food is how it comes packaged so that we can structure a more balanced diet as a whole. You don't want too much of one thing and not enough of another. And sometimes, people, because of their food preferences, they may find that their foods are like high in protein, but they have a lot of fat with them. And so they're getting too many fats. But then now they're like, oh, I've got really low carbohydrates because all the foods that I enjoy have a lot of fat and protein. Well, they're going to need to find some different balance, or you could have, a different structure. It's very, very easy on a plant-based diet to get lots of carbs. So that's not typically hard to do, especially if you're eating plenty of um, grains, beans. What else am I thinking? Fruits, vegetables, all these things have lots of carbohydrates in them. And some of them will have, a bit more protein and some will have a bit more fat. Just kind of depends on how it is you're putting them all together. So I'm going to share a handful of some of my favorite protein sources, and feel free to steal these and use them in recipes, or, take my suggestions, or share with me on social media some of your own suggestions and favorite foods too, because this is definitely not a full list, but I just picked out some that I've been eating a lot lately that become my primary protein source in my meal. And I thought that they might be helpful for you because they may not be ones that you use on a regular basis. And they probably aren't the first ones that come to mind when someone who is not plant-based asks you, where do you get your protein? So now you can share very unique to them, maybe not to you, but to them, sources of protein that you can get. So here's some of my favorites. I'm going to start off with one that is one of my newest favorites, and that is the fava bean tofu. And this is by Big Mountain Foods. And if you can find it, I don't know how popular they are. They have them in my local Sprouts. I've seen them, I think they were advertised on Vons, which was also Safeway. These are all United States stores. But So hopefully they're widely available. But what I love about fava bean tofu is number one, the texture is really great. But in only 3 ounces of tofu, it has 16 grams of protein, and there's no fat and there's no carbs. So if I'm really looking for just a pure protein source and I don't want to use protein powder, like if I want to eat food, then this is my go-to uh, food source, is the fava bean tofu. You can use it just like you use any other tofu, so you could put them in stir fries and dishes and whatever. But my favorite thing to do with it these days is I make a protein dessert out of it. And I am a huge dessert person, but I try to stay on track with my macronutrients, and especially if I'm training. And so there's really no room in there for those extra vegan donuts, unless I'm running that vegan donut 5K. Um, but they don't have those every weekend, unfortunately. So no vegan donuts. But what I do make is a high protein chocolate mousse made out of the fava bean tofu. So simple, so easy. I batch it, so I make several dishes and then I stick them in the refrigerator and just pull them out for dessert for a couple, every couple of days or for several days in a row. So simple. You use the fava bean tofu, a little bit of maple syrup, some cacao powder, and a little bit of almond butter. Like for one serving, I use like half a tablespoon of almond butter just for that texture and creaminess. And I use a stick blender, blend it all up, and then stick it in the refrigerator till the next day. You don't even have to stick it in the fridge for the next day, but I like the texture of it. So simple and high in protein. It does have a bit more carbs because of the maple syrup, but you know, it's kind of a trade-off. It's still much lower than any other type of dessert that you're gonna get, and it has a lot of protein compared to any other dessert you're probably going to find. So super simple, homemade, easy. The next food that I'm really loving is edamame. And edamame is very versatile. I buy it both frozen and I also buy the dry roasted edamame. And it gives me some flexibility in my snacking mostly. But shelled frozen are the easiest to work with. So if you're going to the grocery store and you're like, okay, we've got edamame in these little pods, what do I do? Those are difficult unless you just want a snack. I would look for the frozen shelled edamame because then you can just do, a half a cup or something and put it in a recipe. So great for recipes. Otherwise, you just defrost them under some cold running water and eat them cold as a snack. There's 9 grams of protein in a serving of edamame, of the shelled frozen edamame. Um, but yeah, just dump them in any meal that you've got, stir fries, soups, whatever, salads. Put them on top of a salad. They're great. The dry roasted edamame are fantastic. They have a little bit of salt, so you can get them in different flavors. I've seen them online, like at Amazon and stuff, where you can buy them in different flavors. I just get the plain with a tiny bit of sea salt. They're really simple. There's no oil. So if you are following a no oil plant-based diet, they're fantastic. I try to avoid oils myself, so I love them. But they make a really travel-friendly snack, whenever you're, like, on the road or you're busy or you're gonna go to the office and you need to just take a snack with you that you could snack on. Where I find them really helpful is when I get stuck in 2 and 3-hour meetings, then I always bring my little edamame, and I just sit there and, like, snack on them the whole time that I'm sitting in this meeting. So, if you get hangry and you're in meetings, have your dry roasted edamame with you. It'll save your day, I'm telling you. But they have 14 grams of protein in just a serving of those dry roasted edamame. So that's a lot of protein. It'll keep you awake during that meeting. Soy is just so high in bioavailability for protein, also. So when you're looking at one of those scales that I was talking about, soy is right up there with whey protein. So if you're considering the highest bioavailable, bioavailable protein source, then look to your soy products. So your edamames, your tofus, tempehs, things like that. They're going to have the highest level of bioavailability. All right, so the next food I want to talk about is seitan. And seitan is actually vital wheat gluten. So it is the wheat gluten from wheat, or it's the gluten pulled out of the wheat. So obviously, if you're celiac or you have any allergies, this is not going to be the food for you. But if you don't have any wheat allergies, then this is a great protein source. It's approximately 19 grams of protein, and I think that was in like 25 grams of powdered flour vital wheat gluten. So it kind of depends on what you're using it in and how you're making your recipe. You'll have to measure it out to know how much is in your meal that you're preparing. You can buy them prepared as store bought, just already, just open the package and heat it up and go. Or it's super easy to make, very easy to make seitan at home using vital wheat gluten flour. You do want to have another flour to mix in with it, or you can use beans to mix in with it as a binder. There is less sodium, of course, in the homemade, but if you're going to buy the prepackaged, there's more sodium in there. If you're a runner, might not be a bad thing, but just be aware. It's a packaged food, so there's sodium in it. Um, but you can season, the seitan if you make it at home, however you want. So you could make it sort of like a chicken flavored seasonings, or I like to use prime rib seasoning, for my seitan steaks. Those are so tasty. But the prime rib flavoring, that's all it is just seasoning that's, seasoning meat, seasoning seitan, whatever. It's just seasoning. So it's fantastic. Um, and then there's a lot of recipes online. So if you like Pinterest, go at it. You're going to go crazy with the seitan recipes on Pinterest. Careful. There's a lot of them. So I pick out just a couple of my favorites, and then those are my go-to recipes whenever I want to make some. I batch cook it. And so I make a bunch of it, and then I just use it like you would any other meat or meat replacement in our case. And I just toss them in recipes. So like the chicken flavored ones that I use a chicken broth flavoring with them. Those come out in like little chunks, like you would have if you were omnivore and you would have like chunks of chicken. That's how I tear it apart and cook it. And so it comes in these little chunks. And then you could just, again, toss those in whatever recipe that you're making, just like you would if you were using chicken. Um, Okay, so my favorite thing that I've been making, for a long time now, but I just made a batch of them because they batch cook fantastic, are the, plant-based or the vegan seitan or the sei they're vegan, of course they are, seitan Salisbury steak. And the reason why it's so great is number one, you can make a double batch, super simple. And I've got 12 steaks. So I have 12 meals that I cooked all at the same time that took me maybe an hour at the tops to put it all together. Um, and you make the seitan steaks with lentils. And because you're combining those two, the vital wheat gluten and the lentils, you now have a complete protein all in one meal. So by the seitan in and of itself is not considered a complete protein because it's missing lysine. But the lentils have lysine. So if you combine the two in a recipe, well, now you have a complete protein and you have all the other like great proteins. So now you've got bioavailability, you've got a complete protein and a tasty dinner. So it's a win, 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 win. um, Definitely recommend those. Okay, next one I want to talk about are hemp hearts seeds. And seeds, of course, you got to be a little careful with. There is a lot of protein in hemp heart seeds. This is not going to be your meal. What this is good for is if you've got a lower protein meal, like maybe you've got a salad, or maybe you've got a cup of plant based yogurt. and it doesn't have quite the amount of protein that you want for, to try to reach that 20 to 25 grams per meal that you're trying to reach. You can add a couple tablespoons of hemp heart seeds to that and boost the protein. So in 3 tablespoons of hemp heart seeds, you get 10 grams of protein. It's quite significant, especially if you're adding it to a meal and you're just trying to tip the scales, which is oftentimes what I use it for. Then it's fantastic. But do remember, all of these, any seed, any nut is going to be packaged with fat. So that's great if you're trying to also get your fat levels up to where they need to be. But if you are watching fat and trying to keep it lower, or you already have other meals within your day that have higher fat, you may need to find a different solution. But otherwise, it's fantastic to add to a meal where you need a little extra protein and you have room for the fats in it too. But a lot of plant based diets are really low in fat, and we struggle to try to find ways to add fat into the diet so that we do. Get those hormone support and things like that. So, hemp seeds can be a really great boost and do some double duty in a meal. All right, next one for you is another one of my favorites. All these things are so good. I love all of these, and I'm so happy to be sharing them with you. I hope you're liking this and getting something from it. So, the next one is called Butler's Soy Curls. And soy curls are just what they sound like. They're soy, and they are dehydrated soybeans that are reconstituted into like these little strips, kind of again resembling chicken strips, but they're dehydrated and they come in a dry form. You can store them in the cupboard. Once you open them, I do recommend that you put them in the refrigerator just as you use them up, just so they stay fresh and they don't get icky. Some people like to store them in the freezer. It's not necessary. And personally, I would never be able to fit them in my freezer because my freezer is always full. But I store them in a dark cupboard, and then when I open a package, then I put it in the refrigerator until I'm done with the package. That's my tip. So they're one ingredient, soy. That's it, soybeans. And they are 11 grams of protein for one serving. And a serving is 3/4 of a cup dry. And so when you rehydrate the soy curls, it actually makes a larger amount. So for me, they usually 3/4 of a cup to 1 cup is usually all I need for a meal. And that really depends on, again, what macronutrient levels I'm trying to reach for my meal that day. But it's considered a meat substitute. So you can, again, put this in anything that you would otherwise put meat in, like chilies. Oh my gosh, it makes a great chili. I make a caballero soy curl chili with some tomatoes and chopped up jalapeno peppers. It's so good, and white beans and soy curls. So delicious, and it makes a big batch again. So I love to batch cook and get it all done as soon as I can. And then I kind of divvy it up into serving sizes, freeze it, refrigerate it, whatever, and have super simple meals I can just take out of the refrigerator when it's 8 o'clock at night and I'm exhausted. So that's how I live. Don't know about you, but that's what I do. They also are a really great snack. So I have made soy curl jerky, and I've gotten pretty good at this, if I do say so myself. The first time I made it, they came out kind of chewy and not so great. Now I learned the trick to make soy curl jerky, and that is that you marinate the soy curls in a marinade that you put together yourself that makes it kind of smoky flavor, and you cook them in the air fryer, and then they come out like chewy but a little crispy, and oh, they're so good that way. So the trick is the air fryer. You can bake them, but you got to like bake them to death in order to get them to the right consistency. I find that if I just do batches in the air fryer, they cook up a lot faster and much better texture. So there's a trick for you. All right, my last one that I want to share with you, last high protein uh, source for like your main protein in your meal is, again, a super simple one, red lentil pasta. And again, this one's going to be packaged with more carbohydrates than with fat. So this is a carb heavy, high protein. It's 14 grams of protein and 34 grams of carbs for a 2-ounce dry serving of pasta. So when that cooks up, it's going to be more, of course, because that's dry. For me, as long as there's plenty of sauce and veggies and things that go with it, that 2 ounces is oftentimes plenty. Sometimes I bump it up to 3 ounces, depending on, again, my needs for my macros. And again, those are just me based on my body weight, my goals, etc. Your inputs and numbers and quantities are going to be different, maybe. So you really need to look at you and your needs, and how much of these, as far as quantity of food that you need. But what you look for when you're going to use a red lentil pasta is look at the ingredients. There are some pastas out there that are made with other types of flour and red lentil pasta. Try to avoid those if you can, and really look for the single ingredient pasta where it's just red lentil flour, period. So that's just lentils that are ground up into a flour, and then they make the pasta from it. So try to find those. The one that I found that I like the most is Barilla, and they just have the single ingredient. So if you're looking for one to try, I would recommend that one. And that one you can find pretty much everywhere. I think that they are an international brand. So maybe even across the pond, as they say, and in other countries, you can find the Barilla pasta. I like to use this in one particular recipe. I mean, I use it in lots of recipes, but one particular one that comes to mind is mushroom stroganoff. So you make a big batch of you cook a bunch of mushrooms, and you add the vegetable broth and the seasonings and whatnot, and you just toss in the pasta, cover it up, and then it all cooks together. So it's just a one pot stroganoff, but it's made with mushroom. And then I get the protein by using the red lentil pasta instead of adding in any type of meat substitute or anything else. Of course, if you want to boost it once it's cooked, you can add to it if you want. But as far as cooking it, that dish is a meal in and of itself because of the carb rate and the protein, and then the fats from, I don't know how much fat is in that one, but I think it has enough for what I need. So anyway, it's a great pasta dish. Good as an option. But oh my gosh, I mean, I can go on forever. There's so many options when it comes to these primary protein sources in your meals. So next time someone asks you, where do you get your protein? You could like rattle off a list of different sources of places that you get your protein. I used to just come back and say, well, protein's in, all foods, and that's where I get it. But I don't know. I think I like my list more because it just shows it's like, yeah, there's a lot of places we can get our protein. Protein is not an issue. If anything, I have to be careful that I don't get too much protein. There's times when I, am tracking my days intake, and I realized that my protein's like up at like 150 grams. I'm like, yeah, I don't need that much. So I kind of got to go through and restructure my meals for that day, and, move things around, take things out, and fix it because that's too much for me. But it might be great for you. But on a regular basis, it's absolutely no problem for me to get 100 grams of protein just based on whole foods. And then I personally like to supplement my day with a little bit of protein powder in my coffee in the morning, mainly because I just like the flavor and the texture that it gives my coffee. It makes it creamy, and I don't use cream in my coffee. So I just like the texture. And then in the evening, I make a chicory root tea, and that's kind of like coffee, but there's no caffeine or anything. It's tea made with chicory root powder. And again, I like the texture, so it makes it more creamy, more palatable. It's not so bitter. So I usually bookend my days with a little bit of protein. And so that bumps up my levels over the 100 grams, depending on whether I do a half a scoop or a whole scoop. It just depends on what I'm doing for the week. So Anyway, I hope this has been helpful and that you've enjoyed this episode and you've gotten some great tips and maybe some new foods that you hadn't thought about. But if you need help, putting it all together and you want to know more about this, then I invite you and encourage you to jump on a totally relaxed, easy call with me, 20-minute strategy call. Tell me about what it is that you're trying to do. Where are your challenges? Where are you getting stuck? Is it protein? Are you struggling with fats? Are you just like, I don't understand any of this? um, or I've never tracked food in my life, but I'm open to it and willing to because I want to know, how I should structure my day for performance. Um, all of those things I'm happy to chat with you about. Kind of pick and see, based on where you see your challenges, give you some tips and guidance on maybe those areas and see if it's a good fit for us to put a program together that would work for you and your specific needs and your goals. So, anyway, I invite you to jump on a call with me. The link is in the show notes, and it's also on my Instagram page. So, if you want to join me over on Instagram, let's keep the conversation going. Share more about the protein sources that you're using and the recipes, and I will put them in my recipe holder, and then you can put my recipes in yours. And together, we will continue on this plant based journey. Um, being healthy and vibrant and active, all the way into our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. So, this is a lifestyle. This is not a diet. So, I hope that you enjoyed the episode. Stick around, more episodes to come. And in the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for joining me. And don't forget, run your best life on carbs. I'm Coach Val. I will see you next time. Take care.